Hey guys, what's up? Zambash here. Know it's been a long time since a video, and I've never done a Grim Dawn video on this channel before, so this is Grim Dawn I'm going to be playing here today, and I will be doing kind of a build guide in this video, and it's going to be a bit of a long, rambly video, because it's going to have a little bit about my life and why it's been so long since I've uploaded anything, as well as instead of just, blazing through the build as quickly as possible, as I discuss things about the build in the game, I know most of my viewers are Path of Exile viewers, so this is also going to be my kind of shot at a sort of general intro, at least to the later game of Grim Dawn for PoE players. So I'm about to open a portal to a zone called the Shattered Realm here. It's like very similar to Rifts in Diablo 3. It's one of the main endgame activities in Grim Dawn. It's like a very, very high scaling dungeon that you go progressively deeper. And as you hit certain milestones, you get recipes that let you make these waystones, which you can then craft at the blacksmith, and that lets you start your next run back at the same place that you were in your previous one. So I'm going to tell this guy I have a waystone and offer the waystone. I'm on ultimate difficulty, which is the highest difficulty setting in the game. There's normal, elite, and ultimate, kind of like old Path of Exile difficulties. And 50 isn't super deep in Shattered Realm, but it's fairly deep. You definitely need a pretty strong character to go this deep in the Shattered Realm. As you can see, I am a gun-using character here, technically a crossbow, but I've transmogged a gun skin onto my crossbow, which is very nice. There's a nice transmog system in this game, and it's nice that you can do guns to crossbows, because crossbow is what I'm using for this build, because it's the item I wanted to use, but when you're actually playing with the crossbows, they just sound so anemic and boring compared to the guns, and so I was really happy to find out that I can transmog guns onto crossbows. I've been playing Grim Dawn quite a lot over the past couple of weeks. I had a hankering to play an ARPG, and Grim Dawn is one I've come back to a bunch of times over the years when I don't feel like jumping back late League in a Path of Exile League, which I usually don't. I don't really like late League Path of Exile. So, I don't know exactly how things are these days in Diablo, but similar to like a Diablo Rift, as you kill monsters and pick up their souls, you fill up this meter, and I'm in what's called a chunk. You do 3 chunks to complete a shard, and you'll fight bosses at the end of the shard, and the shards are like the levels. So, we gotta do 3 things. Sometimes, rather than just like random areas with random enemies to kill, a chunk can also have like a boss in it, whether it be a semi-random boss that just fills a ton of the bar, or like a special scripted encounter that fully fills the bar guaranteed. You've got a dodge button in Grim Dawn. One of the reasons I just started playing Grim Dawn a bunch again is because they came out with a huge patch, and one of the things was this dedicated little dodge. And then you've got some mobility skills that have been in the game for a while, like this little teleport you'll see me use occasionally. As far as why I haven't uploaded any videos for a long time, I'll just keep working through this Shattered Realm here. I'll probably just do 1 shard and then talk about the build. You can basically get the idea. As far as life, I quite enjoyed Trial of the Ancestors for PoE, but I didn't play it super long. Unfortunately, life has not been going so great. 3-ish months ago, my wife left, and we ended up getting a divorce. So that kind of sucks, but it is what it is. With that going on, haven't had see, here's just a random boss. My meter's already almost full here, so it doesn't really matter, but this would have given like half of a full meter. And then it just opens a portal to the next chunk. But yeah, I didn't have a lot of motivation to make content or really do a lot of anything with that all going on. But at this point, I feel like I'm mostly kind of over the grieving process of the relationship and have just kind of settled down to now I guess just kind of a baseline of being a somewhat lonely and depressed 31-year-old trying to figure out how I'm supposed to start everything over again. You can see this big skull icon on the map that's showing me there's a boss over here. And it's this big frozen dude, Musalauk the Chillwind. He calls down stuff from the sky, and he will shoot a big ice wave, which we'll dodge to the side of, make sure we don't get hit with that. He does that pretty frequently, so we'll just keep dodging back. use our range. I can face tank quite a lot on this character. I've got a lot of life, but you know, kind of like PoE, you probably shouldn't face tank something just because you probably can. But anyways, yeah, settling back into life now, and I'm really looking forward to this next PoE League. It looks pretty sweet with all the new transfigured gems and stuff. So, it looks like now that was the third chunk, and we'll be going into the shard here. I said at the end of every shard is a boss. Once you get up kind of high in levels in Shattered Realm like this, it's multiple bosses, so like there will be 4 here. And I just usually kind of try and lure one at a time. I don't really want to fight all the bosses at once. See, that guy chunks me really hard, but him I know I can face tank. This Griffin I can as well, but again, not really any reason to, so I'll just kite out his melee attacks when he gets close. I have really high move speed, which makes it easy to kite. He called in some reinforcements, but they went down right as he died. Who do we got here? Alright, Bulgog is easy. Normally, when I'm doing Shattered Realm, I do at least 2 shards per session, because 2 shards is the number of shards you have to do to get the maximum number of reward chests when you decide to claim your reward. And this whole thing, the Shattered Realm, is kind of like a double or nothing thing. At the end of each shard, you can either take your reward or go to the next for a bigger reward. And I suppose it's not nothing. If you die, you lose a bunch of time, but you can come in, and the only thing you lose is like 2 bonus chests for running out of time. So it's not a big deal if you die and run out of time. But who's this guy? Xanter and the Immortal. I think he's a fairly easy one as well. So we'll just stand in his face. This is the first build that I've ever like kind of min-maxed to some degree. I played a couple builds to level 100 over the past couple weeks as I've been playing this game a lot, but this is the first time I've ever like really spent a lot of time farming for specific stuff for a build and put together really good items in pretty much every slot. Oh, we accidentally clicked next shard here, so I guess we are going to do 2 shards. Look at the max rewards. Alright, so this one with all these grubs, this is what I was talking about. This is actually good that I get to show you this. This is one of the special scripted ones here, and here's this bloated maggot boss. None of the other monsters in this zone will give any meter. You just have to kill him, and he gives you that overwhelming shattered soul into the next round. Those boss ones that are scripted are nice because they're generally quite a bit faster than just going around and killing random stuff. As you can see, I'm pretty much just a pure right-clicker kind of a build. I have like very few things on my skill bar here, and 90% of what I'm doing is just holding down right-click for this savagery skill. And then you'll see though that I shoot quite a few different things, and that's because I have a number of different skills that have a chance to be used whenever you use a default attack. And savagery is what's called a default attack replacer. Oh, here's Xanter and the Immortal just as a random boss encounter here rather than a shard boss like we just fought. So I shoot lots of different things that all do various effects and lots of amounts of damage. You can see that almost filled our meter all the way up, killing the random boss spawn. These guys should finish us out here. Yep. This is the first character I've ever played as a ranged attack-based character. Main reason is because I found the weapon that I'm using on another character, and I was like, that seems like it'd be a cool thing to build around. And sure enough, this has turned out to be one of my favorite and definitely my strongest character ever, which is why I put a bunch of time into actually min-maxing it and developing a relatively complete character. Only things I really have left to do on this character, you know, of course you could always get better rolls on stuff and whatnot, but this is essentially an SSF game. There's no, there is online, but it's just like peer-to-peer. There's no persistent servers or anything, so there is a Discord and stuff, and people do trade, but it's not really a trade kind of game. So for all intents and purposes, it's basically SSF, and legendaries and epics for the most part can't, which are equivalent to uniques in Path of Exile, can't really be target farmed. Only some of these green items, which are equivalent to rares in PoE, but there's a system in this called Monster Infrequence, where certain types of champion or boss monsters will drop these Monster Infrequent items that always have a specific set of mods on them as a rare item, and then can roll standard rare affixes on top of those. So in certain slots, those end up being your strongest items rather than just all legendaries and uniques. Ready to go into the boss now. We'll go over more of that when I talk about items and stuff in a second here. What do we got? Sigil of Cthon. Alright, this guy's not too bad. There's like two very bad bosses called the Iron Maiden and some other guy that's called something the Unseen. Their existence is the main reason I'm kind of carefully checking these before I just run up and start fighting him, because those two require some pretty careful kitey gameplay. They do very high damage, and one of them has like a... oh yeah, I forgot this guy actually is the second phase. Totally forgot about that. After you kill this guy, he turns into this Unraveler dude. We'll do a little bit of dodging, avoid the real big slaps from him. So you can see, I just kite stuff when needed to. The little dodge is really nice. I use the teleport if I want to get a lot of distance quickly. We've got this Griffin guy, same one we did last time. And the other guy that's over there is a fairly strong one. We might have to be a little careful with him. I think I'll try to face tank him on this character. I haven't fought him yet on this character. But he occasionally does like a barrage of projectiles that really does a lot of damage. But we might be able to just blast through this guy even if he does that. Ooh, he almost got us there. I'm going to do a little distance here. I don't want to die on this guy. He sometimes does that teleport that actually swaps your position with his. So that's those bosses down. Now it's 2 shards down, which I said gives you the maximum number of reward chests. So this guy either takes you to the next floor or you say, I want my reward. So I'll take the reward. And you can see we've just got all these chests here. These 2 chests in front are the bonus chests that you only get if you beat the timer. So they are your motivation for beating the timer. And around these front, yeah, see, purple is legendary and blue is epic. Both are basically equivalent to uniques in Path of Exile, with the purples generally being stronger and harder and higher level. But not always. There's some really good epics as well. Purples are generally rarer, but since I'm pretty high in ultimate difficulty on the Shattered Realm, you get a lot of purples. One thing that is kind of nice, but I suppose also annoying in a way because it encourages a kind of degenerate form of gameplay. And it's the reason why this Shattered Realm is like one of the main endgame activities you do if you are trying to get all uniques. See, these are all rares, green. And any ones with this icon are monster infrequent ones from specific monsters that I killed while going through the shard. And they can also roll other stats on them. There's a merchant in here you can do if you want, but I'll just go back to the town. But the system I was talking about, there's kind of a pity system on legendary drops. Some legendaries and epics are much more common than others. But as long as you stay within the same game session, if the game drops a legendary or epic that has already dropped within that session, it will try to re-roll it several times to give you one that hasn't already dropped within that session. And so that's why the Shattered Realm is nice, because you can just rerun those couple of floors over and over using a Waystone to start on a high floor each time, all within the same game session. So with that and the pity system, if you just like leave the game running for a long time, sometimes I'll just leave the game on in the background, because this game, if you minimize it, it like totally pauses it, so it doesn't really suck up any computer resources or anything. So you can just leave up one game session for like as long as you want, basically, and keep farming Shattered Realm runs to use that pity system to try and get a wide variety of legendaries and epics. So that's how the Shattered Realm works. The other main kind of endgame things are called challenge dungeons, and they are essentially kind of set dungeons that'll be like the same every time, but are very high level zones and have very strong bosses in them. But I like Shattered Realms for general farming, and of course there's a big campaign that you can go through on all 3 difficulties. I actually haven't even quite finished the campaign on Ultimate here. If I open the world map, you can see I was heading up this way, and I just finished this. This up here, going up this way, I don't want to like spoil story stuff, but this was the end of the normal game. Then you head up this way is the Ashes of Malmuth expansion, and the Shattered Realms and stuff in this Corvin Basin area that I was doing are part of the Forgotten Gods expansion. And they have announced that they are actually releasing another major expansion for this game next year. So that's pretty exciting. A couple years ago, in fact, even just like Ashes of Malmouth, they were probably like, yeah, this is only going to be probably the only big expansion. But then they did Forgotten Gods, and now they're doing another one. So I'm glad enough people are still playing and buying Grim Dawn to make it worth it for them to do that. So now I will go into the build specifically and talk through some similarities and differences to Path of Exile. So if I open my skill window here, this is a more traditional kind of RPG system than Path of Exile, where you have specific skills that are associated with specific classes. I think I probably got this wrong. There's like 9 different classes. There's going to be another one in the expansion, and you get to pick 2 classes on each character. If you ever played Titan Quest back in the day, this is made by the same people who made Titan Quest, so this will look very familiar. You essentially have this bar that you put in for the class that gives you generic stats and health and mana and everything, and then you have to get that bar up to the thresholds matching these verticals before you can put points into skills, and of course you have to put points into prerequisites before you can put points into the linked ones. So on this character I am a shaman and an inquisitor. The classes are really flexible, especially as you get later into the game and start seeing how a lot of the unique items modify different skills and stuff. You can do a lot of different kinds of builds with each class, and then of course the fact that you get to combine 2 classes on each character is like, even more possibilities. This is the only other ARPG I've played that comes close in terms of like build possibilities with Path of Exile. You can do so many different kinds of builds in this game, using all sorts of different skills from different classes, and there's even builds that use skills granted by items as like your main skill. So the possibilities are really endless. You can play about any kind of character you would possibly want to play in the game. As I said, I'm a shaman and inquisitor. I'll start with the skills I'm using. So the sort of main skill I'm using here is savagery. This, as I mentioned way earlier, is called a basic attack replacer. So you essentially use this instead of your default attack, and it gives bonuses. And then anything that would normally proc off of default attacks, like some of these things, it says activates off default weapon attacks. They will also activate off of default attack replacers like savagery, and they will get the damage bonuses that are provided by those default attack replacers as well. So savagery is the main skill. As you can see, I've got 26 out of 16 points. So in Grim Dawn, any skill levels that go above the natural maximum of a skill are called ultimate levels, I believe. And you can get technically as many as you want, but you only actually continue to get bonuses up to 10 ultimate levels over a skill. So if I hover here, you can see it says current level 15 plus 11. So I've only put 15 points into this despite it having a 16 max, because I have a total of plus 11 from gear, which brings me to the 10 over the limit. So it would have just been a wasted point if I'd put another one in there. So if you get over 10 ultimate levels, then you can just take some points out and allocate those elsewhere. Then I've got a couple of upgrades that give like just attack speed and more lightning damage and stuff. Savagery in general adds a bunch of lightning and bleed to your attacks and just increases their damage in general. Because I'm using two-handed weapons, you'll see some skills have these little ones that like branch off to the side rather than going as direct upgrades. They are like modifiers that change the way a skill functions in some way, or are only applicable when using certain gear types. This says requires a two-handed melee or ranged weapon. Since I'm using a two-handed range, I can put points into this, which increases the damage of the skill by 18%. I'm not totally sure on this, but I believe when something says total damage, that essentially functions as a multiplicative bonus, whereas basically every other kind of damage stat in this game is additive, but total damage I think is multiplicative. So that's my main skill. I've got the good ones maxed there, and my extra points I get here in the end game. As I said, I haven't quite finished the campaign and ultimate on this character yet because I was focusing on doing so many other things, so I actually still have like 2 more skill points to get, I think, pumping the rest of them into tenacity of the boar here at the end. You'll notice this gives a stat called offensive ability. This is similar to accuracy in PoE, but it is also crit wrapped into the same stat. So if I go to my character page here, you'll see I've got offensive ability and defensive ability. Monsters also have these stats, and you can see there's a bit of a description right under it as I'm hovering here. Essentially, defensive ability gives you a chance to dodge, and offensive ability, so it's like evasion, and offensive ability is like accuracy. The higher your offensive ability is relative to a monster's defensive ability, the more chance you have to crit. And this character has quite a lot of offensive ability. If I go over here and hit these training dummies, I have a skill that'll proc and give me even more. You can see before the target switched to that training dummy, on that other guy, I had like an 11, and with that up, I probably would have had like a 12% crit. That's really good crit in this game against endgame bosses. This isn't like PoE where you can get your, critical strike chance to 100%, which kind of defeats the whole meaning of a critical strike. But just stacking as much offensive ability as possible is what you want to do to be able to get critical strikes. So that's how that stat works, and again, defensive ability is like evasion. You can see that guy had a 100% chance to hit me, which isn't surprising. I haven't stacked a whole lot of defensive ability on this character, and you're generally not going to be evading many boss attacks, but you do still want high defensive ability so that they don't crit you. You can see he only had about a 10% chance to crit me as well. So, other skills, I'm just going to keep, mentioning mechanics as I see them that are things that are different from PoE. Down here, I've got a passive skill called Mogdragon's Pact. You can see near the top there, it says buffs are automatically activated. So buffs are kind of like auras in PoE. You can see it reserves a certain amount of energy there. You can have a lot in this game because all of them are just flat reservations. I don't think there's anything that does like a % reservation. So you can stack a lot of different Rs and stuff, but they're not like as broken as they are in PoE. And you can see this one gives me flat physical damage as well as health and energy regen. Energy is mana, it's the green bar here. Then I have also maxed out Heart of the Wild, which gives a bunch of % health and increases health regen and makes reductions in poison and bleeding duration. Oak Skin here, you can see this gives armor and some resistances and defensive ability. I've only put 1 point in it because it's not real important, but I do have an item giving +4 to it, and you don't get that unless you put in 1 base point, so I thought it was worth sticking in 1 because I got +4 from that item and then +1 to all shaman skills from another item, so I get up to 6 points just for putting in 1. So I felt that was worthwhile. Up here, this is a passive. This is only 2-handed weapons, and it just gives a bunch of flat lightning damage and health in my case. So this is another thing I'll mention here now that I see this as % physical damage. In this game, there is damage conversion, but unlike in PoE, only the final damage you get after all conversions is then affected by % increases to stuff. So in my case, I'm converting nearly all of my physical damage to lightning damage, which means that % physical actually does like nothing for me. Unlike PoE, where damage bonuses apply at each step along the conversion chain, it's not how it works in this game, so you don't get to like double dip on certain types of damage bonuses. And you'll also notice this gives internal trauma damage. In this game, every damage type, I believe, maybe not chaos, I'm not sure. Most damage types have an associated dot that goes with them, and you'll find the stat for that on pretty much everything that gives the stat for the main damage type as well. In my case, I have a bunch of electrocute. That's the dot version of lightning. And how dots work in this game is, rather than like true dots, they tick at a fixed rate, and they can also crit on each tick, which is interesting. So your offensive ability also works with your dots really well. And then on top of Brute Force here, I have maxed out Feral Hunger. This is one of the chance to be used on a default attack. You can see there it says activates off default weapon attacks, 27% chance to be used. With melee, it hits in an arc and does a certain number of targets. With ranged, you can see it just has 100% chance to pass through enemies. It has a lot of lifesteal on it, 33% of attack damage converted to health. So that's really nice burst heal every time that procs. Over here on the right side, this is called an exclusive skill, as you see there, and it says only one can be active at a time. Most classes have like 2 exclusive skills. You can see there's one here, Primal Bond. That would mainly apply to summoners if I was a summoning character. You can only have one of those, and that is global, so you can't have like one from each class. You only get one period, and they're some of the strongest buffs in the game, which is why they are exclusive, and you only get one. In this case, Stormcaller's Pact gives a lot of generic damage stuff and some conversion, and the main thing that makes Stormcaller's Pact really strong is that 37% crit damage. That's like one of the highest single sources of crit damage in the game, so that's really powerful and goes along with the fact that we've stacked quite a bit of offensive ability. And then finally here, I have Wind Devil that I've only put 1 point into that summons these little tornadoes, and they kind of function like minions. They follow you around, but then if there's an enemy nearby, they will go over and hit the enemy. As you can see, they scale with player damage bonuses, so they're not a true minion in this case, but their AI is like a minion. However, we're not using it for damage, which is why I only put 1 point in the main skill, but then I have maxed out Raging Tempest, this first upgrade here. That slows enemies, and more importantly, you can see it gives minus 36% elemental resistance. So that's kind of like having, an elemental weakness curse in Path of Exile. As you get into Elite, and especially late Ultimate, enemies start having quite high amounts of resistances, so getting a good amount of resistance reduction in your build is really important if you want to keep doing lots of damage and killing things quickly. So now we'll go over to the Inquisitor, which is the second class I picked. I don't know this for sure, because I said this is the first time I've actually ever played a ranged attacker. There are several other classes that go well with ranged attack, in addition to the Shaman. Shaman, I think, is probably like your best choice for two-handed range, but then Demolitionist has a bunch of stuff that's really good for one-handed range. But I think if you're playing a ranged attacker, you're pretty much always going to be picking an Inquisitor as one of your class choices, because it just has some really strong passives for ranged. You can see I haven't taken many things on the Inquisitor tree. I've just gone, all the way up here on the meter to get Storm Spread and some of this other stuff I'll talk about. But it just has really powerful passives that I think you're probably just making a mistake if one of your classes isn't Inquisitor and you're playing a ranged attack build. So right off the bat here, I've got Ranged Expertise. As you can see, this is a ranged weapon bonus, and it allows you to dual wield ranged weapons. By default, you cannot dual wield one-handers in this game, but there are lots of different options for skills on items and passive trees that allow you to dual wield. In this case, we don't care about the dual wield, but we've maxed this out because it gives a bunch of flat piercing damage and attack damage, and it gives percent elemental damage. And a lot of the items I'm wearing convert pierce to elemental, or to lightning specifically, so all of this actually will get shifted to lightning and then scaled by my massive amount of percent lightning and percent elemental damage. Down here, Deadly Aim. This makes it so when you crit for the next 5 seconds, you then get a lot of percent damage and crit damage and offensive ability. So it essentially makes it so if you get 1 crit, you'll then get a bunch more crits easily, because that's a really huge percent offensive ability bonus and really nice crit damage and generic damage. And I've got a little bit of cooldown on gear. Normally it's 5-second recharge, 5-second duration. In this game, I believe pretty much anything with a cooldown that also has a duration effect, the cooldown does go down during the duration. So in this case, if I'm critting reliably, I can basically keep this up continuously, because I even have a little 0.2 second overlap there because of a little bit of cooldown reduction I have. Over on the right here, I've maxed Storm Spread, and again, you can see I've managed to get enough points to get it up to its maximum effective ultimate level of 10 over the default. This is another one that has a chance to proc off of default weapon attacks, 25% chance to be used. Oh, shoot, there we go, that was Storm Spread, that second one. In this game, I believe pretty much all shotgun or all projectiles can shotgun like they used to a long time ago in PoE. So that's why, when possible, I do like to face tank enemies right up in their face, because when Storm Spread procs, we're getting all of our other procs here. Oh my gosh, give me a Storm Spread. All of those projectiles will hit the same enemy, so it is really big damage. And then finally here, I've got 1 point in this Word of Renewal. Pop that occasionally. It's an instant skill that gives a persistent buff and a bit of burst heal. I've only got 1 point in it because I don't really care about any of the stats on it, but I wanted the upgrades for it. Vigor here gives just a lot of flat life and reduced duration of some negative effects on you there. You can see there's various negative effects that hold you in place: freeze, entrapment, petrify in this game. You definitely don't want any of those holding you in place when you're a ranged character. You definitely need your mobility, so I worked to get quite a lot of resistances on that. And then I've also maxed this Steel Resolve upgrade here, which is a bunch of flat fizz. Again, I have almost all fizz converted to lightning, so that will get converted to lightning and then scaled by that type of damage bonus. And this also gives some resistances and damage to Chthonics and Eldritch. There's like various factions of monsters in this game, similar to PoE. I think there's like, gosh, I've been playing PoE for what, over a decade, and I'm not actually sure on this. I think when you hover a monster, it says like beast or undead or something. Same kind of thing in this game. There's factions of enemies. Chthonics are like hell demons, essentially, and Eldritch are the kind of enemies that you mostly fight in the Forgotten Gods expansion. I don't know this for sure. I definitely don't know as much about detailed mechanics and stuff in Grim Dawn as I do in PoE. I believe specific damage type bonuses like that to Chthonics and Eldritch and other things, if you have them, I believe those are also multiplicative stats that multiply your damage to those types of enemies rather than just additive, because I feel like if they were additive, they would be kind of pointless because their numbers are minuscule. Like if I go over here, you can see quite a lot of info about your character on the stat page here. If I go down to magical, there's my lightning, and I have another thing that procs more. Yeah, you can see I've got 2700% lightning damage total, so something like this wouldn't really mean anything unless it was multiplicative, so I believe those are multiplicative. Let's see. I'm going to grab some water here. My voice is getting destroyed. Finally, you'll see a tab in the middle here that I've been avoiding. This should make PoE players really happy, and is a really cool system in this game. It is the Devotion Tree. Now, although everything is not connected to each other, they sort of are in a pseudo way, which I'll explain here in a second. This is a lot like the Path of Exile passive tree. Everything here pretty much is just a passive bonus, just like the things you put in on the PoE passive tree. Except, you will notice on some of the constellations, there's a little icon on the end. Those constellations actually grant a skill, and skills granted by devotion constellations and need to be attached to one of your skills to work. So pretty much anything that happens like when you're hit or you reach a certain threshold, you have to attach to a defensive or aura skill. So you can see I've got Ghoulish Hunger here, has a 100% chance to activate at 45% health. I've got that bound to Stormcaller's Pact. So when I get to 45% health for 5 seconds, that gives me 80% lifesteal, along with buffed general healing effects and physical resistance and attack speed. Super strong steroid, and as long as something isn't one-shotting you, that's like, you can just stand and deliver no matter what for those 5 seconds, because every one of your attacks will just full heal you. Other ones here, and what I mentioned with it being similar to the PoE tree in terms of connection is, if I hover over something out here, you can see it's got an affinity requirement, and over here on the left side of the screen there are 5 different types of affinities. If I hover over them, you can see it highlights the constellations that are mainly associated with those kinds of affinities. You get 55 points. You start right in the middle here, and your first point, has to go into one of these. And that'll give you your 1 affinity, which will then let you grab something fairly close here. That'll give you enough points to grab something sort of on the next ring out, and so on and so forth. The things toward the edges generally have larger affinity requirements and give little or no affinity bonuses, whereas things near the center you can see have small affinity requirements and then give affinity on completion. And one thing you can do is you'll notice I don't actually have one of these middle ones allocated anymore. These things can be self-sustaining, meaning like here, the ghoul, for example. You can put in the red, get the ghoul, that'll give you 3 red, which means you can then take out the red here and the ghoul will self-sustain. If you Google Grim Dawn Star Nav, somebody just made a nice little, basically a tree search algorithm. You can pick all of the constellations that you want, or, you know, it'll tell you whether you can actually have all of them. It's a very simple interface, but works very well. You click Find Path, and it'll tell you exactly the order that you need to allocate and then deallocate on the way back to get those constellations that you selected. So that is how the devotion thing works. As far as the build guide portion, I'll show what I've got here. Sailor's Guide, Eel, Lizard, Viper, Wraith. These ones all close to the center, giving things that I need to get to outside ones. I'm like massively overcapped on movement speed, but that's alright because there's other good stats on these things as well. The main ones I was aiming for, Hydra. I think Hydra is one of those things that it's like you're making a mistake if you don't have Hydra and you're playing a ranged attack build, because it gives so much attack speed, offensive ability, lifesteal, just everything good, slow resistance. So you definitely want Hydra. And as you can see, it requires a ranged weapon, so it actually won't do anything for you if you aren't using a ranged weapon. Down here, I've got Hawk and Toad for some lifesteal and offensive ability. Ghoulish Hunger, just mega strong. I think that's another thing that you basically want on every kind of attack build, and even a lot of casters as well. It's just one of the strongest constellations in my opinion. It's got pretty good general bonuses, and then that Ghoulish Hunger is just a ridiculously strong proc. I've got Tempest. It gives really good lightning stuff, as well as, I believe, some offensive ability and electrocute, total speed. And then this Reckless Tempest, which I have attached to my Storm spread. When that crits, this is guaranteed to go off, and it essentially just rains down lightning on the area for a while, doing a good amount of damage, and has chance to stun. Spear of the Heavens. Again, good lightning stuff combined with Aether. The Aether doesn't do anything for me because I don't do any Aether damage, but good crit damage and lightning, and then a really strong Spear of the Heavens proc here, half the time when you're hit. And once per second, this will drop a spear on the enemy that again does a good amount of damage and has a chance to stun. One thing I'll note here is that unless a skill or a modifier you get specific to a skill says it leeches life, skills don't leech life unless they do weapon damage. So you can see the Spear of the Heavens adds 60% of my main hand damage, meaning it can leech on that portion of the damage. But like those other flat damages there, life leech doesn't apply to those, and that's the same for other skills unless the skill specifically says that it leeches a portion of life, or you have an item that makes that skill specifically leech a portion of life. Generic attack damage converted to health only applies to things that deal % weapon damage. Then finally up here I have Eye of Korvac. Another really strong constellation, has really good generic stats in general, a lot of damage on offensive ability, crit damage, all that good stuff. And then it has a really strong proc here. I think I can get this to go off on a training dummy. Yeah, it's that little swirly around me there. Anytime I crit with Savagery, you can see a bunch of my other stuff going off is there. That swirls around and gives a chance to petrify targets that it hits. Really strong defensively, and it reduces their offensive and defensive ability, and it does main hand damage, so it can leech for me a little bit as well. Just really strong, especially if you are in a situation where you're having to kite back from enemies, because you know you can pop a few shots, get one to proc, and you just back off, and as the enemies are continuing to chase you as you're kiting, they'll keep running through the little petrify ring and getting stuck and taking damage, leeching life to you and everything. So that's really strong, and I feel like synergizes really good with a kitey ranged build as well. So that is how classes and devotions work and what I've picked for this character. Now we'll go through gear. As I said, this is getting to be a pretty long video. So there are, let's see, I'm trying to think. You've got several item slots in Grim Dawn that you don't have in PoE. You've got a helmet, 2 rings, an amulet, a belt, a relic, a medal, boots, gloves, shoulders, armor, pants, and weapon / shield, or 2 weapons, or 2-hander weapon. So, the sort of cornerstone of this build, the whole item drop that I got that motivated me to make this build, is this mythical evoker of Elgoloth. You can see item descriptions and stuff get really long in Grim Dawn. I actually have to use a scroll bar here just to be able to get to the bottom of the item description. But this has general good lightning and bleed stats and stuff. Gives +4 to savagery, which is that main skill I'm using on my right click. 2 to all skills in Inquisitor. And most importantly there, perhaps at the end, 200% lightning damage on deadly aim. That's the one that activates when I crit enemies. It adds an additional 20% weapon damage to savagery, and it gives that storm spread a chance to pierce, so those lightning things can go through enemies, making it good for clear and single target. It's only a level 84 item, the highest items in the game. It only says required 90 there because of one of the things I have attached to it. By default, it's only 84. I wish there was a 94 version, but it is already the mythical version. That's one thing I'll mention is that you've got, like, you'll see all of my stuff says mythical here pretty much. What that means is that some items only have versions at those high levels, but a lot of the epic and legendary items you can find at very low levels, and they're just the regular versions. And then the mythical versions are essentially the same thing, but at a high level that's appropriate to use for endgame, has much higher stats overall, and also sometimes has special properties that the lower level version doesn't, like more skill points or modifiers to skills. So, yeah, as I said, this is the item that motivated me to do the build, and I'll talk about, for PoE players, some of the other things that are attached to that, and all of my items after I get through the gear. So then in addition to that, I'm using the full Storm Serpent set, which is helmet, chest, and belt. So there are sets in this game, and I feel like they're pretty well balanced in general. Certain sets you would definitely want to use like the whole set, and it will kind of define a build for you. Others you get away with just using a couple pieces, depending on exactly what the bonuses you want for your build are. Storm Serpent Helmet is good lightning damage, converts piercing to lightning as well, and has all skills in Shaman, as well as some good resists. The armor, again, good lightning, more piercing converted to lightning, and good resist, and tenacity of the boar, which I'm using. The belt, +3 to savagery, offensive ability, attack speed, good damage, and cold damage converted to lightning. And then below here, you can see if you're just using 2 of the items, you'll get 100% to a bunch of different damage types. And then if you're using all 3, you get more piercing and cold converted to lightning, as well as an additional 3 points to savagery. You'll see some of the lines are grayed out on the items. That is showing me that it gives plus to skills that aren't skills in either of the classes I've picked. So it's just saying, you know, these bonuses aren't applicable to you. And then most importantly, you only get this Storm Serpent Orb 25% chance on attack near the bottom there if you are using all 3 pieces of the set. It only has a 0.5 second cooldown, 25% chance on attack, so it's basically constantly going off. It does okay damage, but most importantly, it has 24 resistance shred. So on top of the 36 resistance shred there from my Raging Tempest, that gets me to a total of -60 resistance on enemies. So I've got a good amount of resistance shred, which is why I can keep doing good damage in endgame. Pants. These are, you can see they're green. They are a monster infrequent like I was talking about. So the base item is the Soleil Sect Leguards. I was looking through what items are available and stuff and decided to go with them. As I said, monster and frequents are the only things you can really target farm because epic and legendary drops are just totally random, but monster and frequents drop from specific monsters every time, so you can target farm those monsters. You farm them a bunch of times until you get a prefix and a suffix that are actually good for your build. In this case, I have the aggressive prefix and the of destruction suffix. By default, these pants give some resists, and most interestingly, and the reason I decided to farm them, is they have that attack damage converted to health. That's one of the properties that's always on the monster and frequent Soleil Sect Leguards. And not many pants have leech, so that was a really interesting place to pick up some extra leech. And then I got that % offensive ability and those damages on the top from the prefix and suffix. So that's what I'm using for legs. Up here, the other monster frequent I'm using is a Golus ring. You know, you fight a guy down in the deeps that looks just like Golem. It says he really liked that ring is the description. He always drops this, and by default it gives a large amount of health as well as health regen, and it gives +3 to Mogdragon's Pact, which is one of the auras I'm using. And again, I killed him several times until I got good rolls, got Thunderstruck of Fortitude, so that gives me lightning damage as well as some other resistances and reduced stun duration stuff. Let's see, shoulders over here, Mythical Astral Mantle. You can see in this case, like some of these are blue. This is a blue set rather than a purple set. But as I said, you know, in general, purple stuff stronger, but not always. There's some really good blue stuff. I really like this Astral Mantle. It gives a really good amount of damage between lightning and elemental. Some good resistances as well, and importantly, it gives +2 Raging Tempest and +2 Storm Spread, so it's got a total of +4 to skills that I definitely want levels on, and it's got a 10% chance on attack. I'll mention for, you know, this is going to sound weird to PoE players, when something says on attack in this game, it means on hit. So the interesting difference between like item skills and devotion skills, as I said, you have to attach these to a specific skill that you have, and you actually can attach them to item skills as well, not just skills from the skill tree, but they will only proc when that specific skill gets a critical attack or, you know, a % chance on happening, whereas item skills will apply to anything. So like if I just start right clicking here, you'll see I'll get Tempest coming down. I've got little lightning orbs flying out and stuff. I do a lot of hits per second, which means even something like this that only has a 10% chance to hit is going to be going off like pretty much on cooldown every time. It has a chance to stun enemies and does a good amount of lightning damage. Here I'm using Mythical Touch of the Ever-Living Grove. At this point in the build, my damage was fine, and I was like, okay, I really just need to get some more health. I have a pretty high life pool on this point in this character. When I have Word of Renewal up, which is always up, I'm almost at 20k. That's pretty high for life in Grim Dawn. You can push it a lot higher if you want to get like life on every piece, but most builds, I would say, that I've seen anyways, don't even have this much life. So this is definitely on the higher end of life for builds. These gloves just give a ton of flat health and % health. Some total speed, which does attack speed, cast speed, and movement speed. And it's still just additive. This is not like action speed in Path of Exile. And then gives +4 Heart of the Oak, +4 Oak Skin, and +4 Word of Renewal. So you know, a lot of levels to skills I'm using. Definitely worth using, even though I don't benefit from the pet bonuses at all. Boots, I'm using these Mythical Storm Titan treads. Again, they've got good damage on them. They've got movement speed, which I don't need at all. As I mentioned, I'm like massively over movement speed cap. Let's see, where's movement speed on the stat page here? Run speed, 140, yeah, you can see my maximum run speed is 141. By default, it's 135, and the Hydra Constellation gives you 6 more. Well, I've got 35 over max, so I actually don't need like any that I have on gear, but still, these give good health, good damage, a lot of good resistances, stun resistance included, some retaliation stuff which we don't care about, and we don't actually benefit from the Primal Strike or Upheaval because we're not using those skills, but they just have really solid stats overall, and this Storm Titan is nice, 25% chance when hit, you just start zapping everything around you repeatedly. Other ring up here, using the Signet of the Rune Father. This just has a lot of damage and then health again. Even though some of those skills aren't grayed out, I'm not actually using any of those skills, so the skills aren't doing anything for me, but just a really, really good stat ring with health, damage, and resistances. Amulet here, I'm using this Mythical Storm Seer Sapphire. It gives a lot of damage, physical and fire converted to lightning, attack speed, resistances, some max res, and +3 Storm Spread, +3 Raging Tempest, as well as you can see there's some extra % weapon damage to Storm Spread and Electrocute, and converts all remaining piercing to lightning damage. So super strong for Storm Spread build, and those 3 points to Raging Tempest are really nice for some extra resistance shred as well. Let's see. Last few things here. Metal. This is, you know, kind of like a second amulet, basically. Fills a similar kind of niche, though metals often have extra skills, which a lot of amulets don't. So I'm using the Pyroclasm mark here. It's kind of fire themed visually and stuff, but you can see it does have same lightning damage bonuses as well. Has attack speed, has some good resistances, including double max res rolls, gives +3 to ranged expertise, really solid, and it gives Blazing Fury. That's yet another chance to be used item skill, 18% chance. Pretty strong one, and I do have some fire to lightning conversion, so even that flat fire damage is not wasted. Over here in the relic slot, I decided to go with the Plunderer's Talisman. Gives some flat elemental damage and percent all damage. I don't get anything from the fire and cold damage, but also total speed and health, and again, it just has a really strong proc on it is the main reason I chose it. 25% chance to be used. Volley fires 3 projectiles, each at 80% main hand damage. And again, a bunch of those flat damages I am actually converting to lightning, so I benefit from them as well. So in total, I have 4 different skills that can proc on my savagery. And how do I word this? My skills together add up to 95% chance to be used. And the way that is calculated, they aren't rolled independently, meaning that I do, in fact, only have a 5% chance to not use any of them. It's not like, pretend they were 25% each. It's not like I have a 0.75 raised to the 4th chance. They're not independent, so they don't work like that. So 95% of the time, I will do one of the weapon skills. So that's Storm Spread. If I right click again, that's Volley, the triple shot. There's another Volley. That one that's red is the can't even remember what it's called now. Feral Hunger. There's Storm Spread again, and that double flame shot is the one from the Pyroclasm mark, the Blazing Fury. So I'm pretty much always shooting some special skill that does a bunch of extra damage and pierces enemies and life steals and all that good stuff. Final things I will mention here. You will notice there are some little icons attached to a lot of my things. These blue ones here, I'll just go over. That just means I have a transmog applied to the item. In all the towns, there's one of these illusionists. Excuse me. Essentially, every time you get a item drop that has a 3D model that you didn't already have, it will then become available in the Illusionist, and you can apply it to whatever you want. I'm actually using the default for this hat because I like the way that hat looks, but you select the slot you want, and then you can click, and you can use whatever. You can go around and change all of your stuff to whatever the different things you have. As I said, you can put rifles on crossbows, you can put crossbows on crossbows. Use whichever things you like the look of, and then at the end you would just hit apply illusion to apply all those. Just costs a little bit of bits, which you essentially have an unlimited amount of. You get way more bits than you'll ever spend. So you can make your character look however you want in that way. But as far as these other little icons, these are called components that you see. You can see here it says corpse dust component. Same over here, corpse dust component. All of these things in my inventory are different kinds of components that drop from monsters, and then there are a bunch more that you can craft at the blacksmith, and they essentially just give different kinds of passive bonuses. Some of them actually will grant you skills and stuff as well. I'm not using any that grant skills, I don't believe. Oh, I am actually. It says here, this attuned lodestone rare component gives lightning and crit damage, and it gives you the static charge skill, 20% chance when hit. Also over here, this Seal of Resonance magic component, that's one you have to craft. That gives elemental, some phys conversion, health, and the main reason I selected it is because it gives you an aura that gives you 15% stun, freeze, entrapment, and petrify duration. Those are all capped at 80. They show up over here on this screen. You can see I'm at capped out trap resist and freeze resist. I've got OK slow resist and petrify resist. All your other res is here. They also cap at 80 by default, and you can see I've got some extra max res on a couple of these. It is like PoE. As you get deeper into the later difficulties, you are expected to have capped resists, and you will get annihilated by things that do those types of damage if you don't have capped resists, so you definitely want to make sure your resists go up. I'll go through the components rest of the components here. Some of these give resistances as well, so you can use those to fill in anything you're missing from the base stats on your gear. I'm using a living armor on my helmet. Man, my voice is going. I'm using another living armor on my shoulders. On both my gloves and my boots, I'm using bladed plating for health and offensive ability. Using a Chains of Olerin in the chest, it gives the reduced entrapment duration as well as percent and flat offensive ability. I am using Scaled Hide on the legs. That in combination with the 2 living armors gets my armor effectiveness. You can see, or armor absorption rather. By default, your armor only applies at 75% of its value, or 70% of its value, and that is the armor absorption stat. You want to use a couple of components to get your armor absorption up to 100%, so it is fully effective. Was that it for components? No, and then I'm using an Ugdenbog leather here on the belt. Cracked lodestone, or attuned lodestones rather, on metal and amulet for a bunch of damage. And I was really disappointed when I looked at the list of available components. I feel kind of dumb using something as common and low as a corpse dust, but there really aren't any good ring components for my build anyway, so just went with corpse dust for some extra health, cap out my vitality resistance, and some health regen. So components are one thing you can apply to items, and then every item again, you'll see at the bottom here, also says an augment. Those come from the various factions in the game. I'm not going to go detailed into factions here, but if I press J, these are all of the different factions in the game. All the ones that are red are enemies, all the ones that are green are allies, and as you get up into high respect with the factions and hit these different tiers, they will sell you different things. So like the Quartermaster here, he's the Devil's Crossing faction Quartermaster. You can see right at the beginning, you can only buy a little, you get to respected, you can buy more, get to honored, you can buy more, get to revered, you can buy even more, and the best augments come from getting to revered status with different factions. On my weapon, I'm using the Potent Malmoth's Heart augment, gives a bunch of fire, lightning, burn, electrocute, flat lightning as well, and some health. And then in addition to components, augments on most of your pieces basically just give resistances. There's some really strong weapon augments and some kind of interesting augments in some of these jewelry slots as well, but all of your armor augments are basically just going to be resistances to help you cap out whatever you were missing. So I've got resistance augment there, resistance augment there, resistance augment there. The metal slot is interesting. There are a special set of augments that only apply to the metal slot, and they all grant different mobility skills. I selected the one that just gives this little teleport. Most of these skills do some kind of like jump or charge, and they will do various damage things as well, but I didn't care to have any damage or anything on mine, so I just went with this teleport because it covers a long distance and has one of the shorter cooldowns. So really good if just pure mobility is all you're concerned with from that mobility skill. And then it has an independent cooldown of the basic dodge as well. So if you just kind of spam those off cooldown, you can move around pretty quickly and stay away from enemies as you wish. Let's see here. Yeah, so that was that augment. Again, just resistance augments all the way here. I've got Osir's Wisdom, which is a good damage offense with percent offensive ability and elemental damage and resistance on one ring and my amulet, and then on the other ring I did this Traveler's Boon to get the last bit of reduced entrapment duration I needed to cap out, as well as some slow resistance. So that covers it for all my gear, skills. This video I can see is almost an hour at this point, so thank you guys for sticking with it. If you're a Path of Exile player and you're looking for something to do between PoE leagues or in that end league dead when time is dead, end league time when the leagues are kind of dead, I strongly recommend checking out Grim Dawn. It is right there with PoE in terms of like character builds. It doesn't have the variety of end game content to do in PoE. It's pretty much just standard monster killing. You don't have anything like, you know, Blight or Sanctum or any of these other sort of like really mechanically different things. So I would say it doesn't have a massive amount of longevity if you're someone who likes to do lots of different kinds of activities within a game. But it is an excellent ARPG, and in my opinion, right there with Path of Exile. And the only thing, as a, you know, many years Path of Exile player myself, I try a lot of ARPGs and I'm like, man, these are just so simple and not enough character diversity and not enough interesting things to invest in, blah, blah, blah. I just like can't get motivated to play any of them after playing PoE, Grim Dawn I still can. I love coming back to Grim Dawn between leagues. It scratches that itch for complexity, but it's also something that you can just do nice and casually, because, you know, it's basically SSF, as I said. That does have the downside of, you know, you're going to have to just do a lot of farming, kind of like Diablo 2, if you want a specific item for build, because most things do not have specific drop tables. So most items, epics and legendaries at least, you're going to have to just find by dropping lots and lots and lots of epics and legendaries until you get what you want. But it's a super fun game. Cool story, tons of lore. Open the lore notes here. There's just pages and pages and pages of lore. Pretty cool characters, really interesting world, and different factions that are at play in the world. As I said, there's another expansion coming for the game next year, so it's still going strong. Definitely check it out if you're looking for something to do between PoE leagues. Thanks you guys for sticking around. For those who did, I know this was a really, really long one, but hopefully I've given those of you who are looking for a Grim Dawn build idea, you know, an interesting idea on what I've done here. And those of you who are coming from PoE, hopefully I've inspired you to give this game a try, because I think it's really good. Like I said, I haven't researched a ton about Grim Dawn stuff in detail. I think there is something kind of equivalent to... There's nothing like Path of Building quite to that level, though the Grim Tools character builder is very similar, but I think there is a way you can like post a link to a character. So I will post a link if I can find something like that in the video description to this character. I assume there is something like that, so that those of you who are just, you know, Grim Dawn people, don't need all this other explanation, can just browse the character build and see what I'm using and see if it's something you want to try. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in a week when the PoE League starts, and I'll be doing videos for that. Really excited for it. Hope you guys are having a good holiday season and you have a good Christmas coming up, and I'll see y'all later.